On a night shrouded in terror, lightning streaked across the sky, heralding doom for the world below. The ground lay littered with the fallen. Brave knights and a grotesque creature, all either gravely injured or lifeless. It was whispered that the 10 mightiest knights, once the stalwart protectors of the realm, had poured every ounce of their life force and mana into a desperate battle, leaving only death to roam the tainted landscape. Yet amidst this desolation, one boy remained, weary but alive, gripping a hammer-like weapon. He gazed at the lifeless form of a knight, consumed by the thought that all this devastation stemmed from a single malevolent force. A monstrous figure with glowing red eyes, the demon commander Gluttony. Gluttony towered over the boy, acknowledging his strength with a menacing glare while tauntingly warning him that it would never be enough to claim his life. The boy, known as Tiny, remained silent, summoning his dwindling energy to lift the hammer once more. He unleashed a skill called Lightning Wallop, striking Gluttony, but the demon merely scoffed, urging Tiny to surrender and declaring his efforts futile. Fueled by defiance, Tiny shouted back, unleashing another attack, Meteor Obergatten. This time, the blow landed, and Gluttony howled in pain as Tiny struck his foot, releasing a blinding light that culminated in a massive explosion, obliterating the demon as the dust settled. Tiny allowed himself a smile, believing he had finally earned a moment of peace. Yet, the toll of the battle weighed heavily on him. He was utterly drained, collapsing to the ground as he realized his mana was depleted. Memories of his childhood flooded his mind, and he pondered whether everything had been flawed from the start. It became clear that his training had been a privilege reserved for the elite knights and nobility, forcing him to endure countless setbacks while progressing at a painfully slow pace. He always held the belief that he could conquer any obstacle, rising from the depths to become one of the most esteemed knights. Yet now, as he surveys the devastation that has befallen the continent, he is haunted by the thought that had he trained with the right techniques from the beginning, he might have saved countless lives. The land is in ruins, and he is gravely injured, feeling his mana seeping away. The demon commander Gluttony, formidable as he was, is merely the 7th in rank among the commanders, leaving him to ponder the true strength of the others and the demon king himself. Suddenly, a voice breaks through his thoughts. It is the Sword Emperor, Asgard von Valina, inquiring if he is still alive. Despite his injuries, he admits that death is imminent. But before he succumbs, he wishes to ask Tiny a question. He wonders why Tiny didn't flee the battlefield, to which Tiny appears puzzled. The Sword Emperor recalls hearing that Tiny hailed from the slums and questions whether he has nothing to protect. His tone is tinged with sadness, suggesting that life must have been a struggle for Tiny. However, Tiny, feeling a bit embarrassed, insists that he was merely contemplating the question. He declares that he despises being seen as weak and believes a man should carry himself with confidence at all times. He would never run away, not for anything. The Sword Emperor bursts into laughter at this declaration, which irks Tiny, who notes that the Emperor still possesses the strength to laugh despite his own dire state. The Sword Emperor encourages Tiny to embrace the talent that has earned him a place among the 10 strongest knights, urging him to seek him out if he returns. Tiny, confused, doesn't grasp the Emperor's meaning. The Sword Emperor warns him that if he visits recklessly, his past self would be incredulous. To share a secret, he glances at his ring, and a soft light emanates from it. He reveals that his daughter's birth name was Leela, inspired by a flower cherished by both him and his wife. Tiny feels a warm glow enveloping him as the Sword Emperor admits he never cared much for that flower but kept silent out of love for his wife. He pleads with Tiny not to forget this. His awareness begins to slip away, leaving him to question if he has crossed into death. When he finally opens his eyes, he finds himself in a familiar childhood room, a haunting echo of the past. He initially thinks it's just a dream, but the memories are so painful that he dreads reliving them. His sister sits beside him, a bittersweet presence, and he knows her time is limited. Soon, they will take her away from him. The recollection of her loss stirs anger within him, especially when he thinks of Irina, who had hidden the golden ring. They had accused him of theft, and in the chaos, His sister had bravely stepped in to defend him, only to be brutally beaten. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and two men storm in. One of them shouts about nearly being caught by Wolf because of that girl, intent on teaching her a lesson to prevent any future defiance. He strikes Tiny's sister, demanding she rise, but Tiny knows she has already sacrificed herself for him, her frail body barely holding on. She collapses, and the men mock her, cruelly taunting her for not surviving a single blow. Even in the face of her death, they continue their assault, and when their cruelty knows no bounds, they attempt to drag her lifeless body away. One man questions why they would want her now that she's dead, to which the other replies with a sickening grin about the twisted pleasures some boys find in bodies, and how fresh bodies can fetch a high price. Tiny feels a surge of helplessness, realizing he can't protect anything, not even in this nightmare. But then, to his astonishment, he sees his hands moving, a surge of mana flowing from him. With newfound determination, he leaps toward the men, shouting for them to stop. He shoves them aside and kneels beside his sister. They rise, fury etched on their faces, demanding to know if he wishes for death. They rain blows upon him, but he stands firm, refusing to budge. Eventually, their energy wanes, and they leave him with a mocking farewell, wishing him a nice life with his deceased sister. He notices that the scene around him has transformed from what it once was, and he realizes this is not the end of the nightmares that have haunted him. Mana pulses in his hands, a sensation he couldn't harness at this age before. Doubt creeps in as he wonders if the Sword Emperor truly sent him back in time. This revelation hits him hard. It's not a dream. He understands that he now has the power to alter the future and prevent calamities. Yet a wave of disappointment washes over him. He wishes he had been sent back just a bit further, enough to save his sister. Tears stream down his face, mingling with blood that seeps from his mouth, a painful reminder of his frail body. He knows he's merely venting his frustrations, and a thought crosses his mind. Perhaps the Sword Emperor lacked faith in his abilities. He resolves to view this as an opportunity to let his sister find peace, a chance he missed in his previous life. Memories flood back of the Sword Emperor, urging him to seek him out without delay. He thinks about how the Emperor will have to wait while he completes his mission. The boys who took his sister from him, known as the Wolves, haunt his thoughts. In his past life, he barely managed to defeat Wolf by breaking his spine, but this time, he is determined to exact true revenge. Before that, he has a solemn duty to fulfill. Preparing a funeral for his sister, he reflects on their shared traits. Their striking black hair and eyes, a rarity on the continent that often drew unwanted attention and hostility. Many among the invaders shunned or harmed him for it, but his sister saw beyond that. She named him Tiny, reminding her of her lost brother, and showered him with genuine love and care. Now, he feels the weight of sorrow as he sends her to rest without having repaid her kindness. Their father stands in prayer, surrounded by mourners at her coffin, beseeching the Lord to cradle Irina in eternal peace. In the midst of it all, Emma, Irina's friend, sensed a shift in Tiny. It struck her as odd, especially since Irina had passed away not long ago. She was taken aback to find Tiny sipping soup beside his sister's lifeless body, and even more astonished to see his wounds miraculously healed. Without hesitation, he hoisted her onto his shoulders, and when Emma inquired about his injury, he brushed it off, claiming he was perfectly fine. She called out to him, questioning why he chose to heed Irina's words over hers. Tiny expressed his gratitude for the soup and her care, assuring her that he would repay her kindness. Emma, still in disbelief, called after him as he stepped out of the house, leaving her to ponder his intentions. Tiny, meanwhile, was consumed by thoughts of how to honor his sister. He believed that this was the only way to make amends, refusing to let guilt weigh him down. Memories of Irina's encouragement echoed in his mind, urging him to stand tall and be confident. He vowed to uphold her wishes, hoping she would watch over him from above, determined to live without regrets. A month later, he found himself in Wolf territory, driven by a thirst for vengeance. As he approached the street, the men there recognized him as the beggar boy from the slums. Tiny demanded to know the whereabouts of Wolf, but one of the men, furious, advanced toward him, ready to strike, questioning how he dared to utter Wolf's name. Tiny grips the man's hand tightly, his voice laced with concern as he inquires about the man's distress. In a swift motion, he channels his mana, twisting the man's wrist and eliciting a scream of agony that echoes through the air. The man collapses, tears streaming down his face as he clutches his injured arm. Approaching the fallen figure, Tiny senses a mix of confusion and fear emanating from him. The man, bewildered by Tiny's presence, prepares to strike, underestimating the boy's capabilities. He seizes Tiny by the collar, attempting to hurl him to the ground, but to his astonishment, he finds himself unable to lift the child. "Why is this kid so heavy?" he wonders aloud. Tiny, with a playful grin, teases him, asking if he feels heavier than he anticipated. He encourages the man to surrender, asserting that he won't succeed in overpowering him. With a sudden, powerful kick, Tiny sends the man sprawling across the ground, landing a good distance away as the man struggles to regain his composure. He feels the surge of mana coursing through him, a reminder of his own potential. He reflects on his past life, recalling how he failed to master this ability. The secret technique Tiny has developed hinges on the fusion of a mana body and a physical body, a powerful combination that enhances strength. However, this newfound power comes at a cost, an insatiable hunger that requires consuming far more than usual. Tiny feels grateful for Emma's assistance, even as she frets over his voracious appetite, having devoured 10 days' worth of food in one sitting. Now, having pushed the man away, Tiny realizes that a freshly awakened mana finds it easier to integrate into damaged bodies. The man, still perplexed, attempts to run, but Ting grabs his leg and swinging him into the air, expressing his gratitude for the chaos he has caused on his body. With a forceful throw, he sends the man crashing into the entrance of a nearby building, shattering the door upon impact. The commotion leads everyone to believe they are facing intruders, but in reality, it's just a scrappy beggar boy causing a ruckus. Tiny steps into the room, and a wave of astonishment washes over the crowd at his audacity to arrive alone. Their eyes narrow in anger, questioning what he could possibly achieve without a weapon. With a curious tilt of his head, Tiny inquires about their definition of a weapon. In a swift motion, he seizes one of them by the leg, declaring that he has a weapon right here in the form of this very man. With a powerful swing, he hurls the unfortunate soul into the throng, causing a chaotic pileup as bodies collide and tumble to the ground in disarray. Nearby, a bystander watches in fear, only to be caught off guard when one of the fallen lands on him. Exhausted from the initial skirmish, Tiny declares that he is finished with the small fry. Now, only the real fighters remain. One of the remaining foes brandishes a sword, and Tiny grins, inviting him to come down and face him. He urges both to join him in the fray, but one boasts that he will slice Tiny in half with his blade. They exchange glances, contemplating the lucrative value of a mana user's body as they leap toward him. Tiny is momentarily distracted by the leg of another man, realizing he had broken their bones. Memories of his past life flicker in his mind, where a commander had scorned him for using a person as a weapon, demanding that he learn proper combat techniques. Now, he is ready to embrace that skill, determined to uphold his dignity. The two attackers descended upon him, swords swinging through the air, but Tiny anticipated their every move, effortlessly dodging their strikes. He retaliated with a punch that left one of them stunned, while the other watched in disbelief. With a swift kick, he sent the second assailant soaring toward the ceiling, then followed him up, seizing him by the collar with a fierce grip. Meanwhile, the leader of the invaders, Wolf, inquires about Tiny's identity. In the past, Tiny was taken aback to learn that this Wolf, once a pimp in a distant region, hails from the Beastman tribe, renowned among semi-human races. The pure silver werewolf stands out, possessing a trait typically found in the direct descendants of the war beast royal family. Tiny recalls the difficulty he faced in defeating this wolf in his past life, puzzled by the presence of such a silver creature in that location. Now, in this new life, he is resolute in uncovering the truth, The wolf demands to know if Tiny is responsible for the current situation, to which Tiny responds with a smile, questioning the wolf's inability to see the end of his will. Angered by Tiny's demeanor, the wolf threatens to tear his mouth off. Unfazed, Tiny urges him to take the matter seriously. The wolf transforms into his beast form, but Tiny is surprised to see that he lacks silver fur. He mocks the wolf, calling him a puppy, which ignites the wolf's fury. The wolf lunges at him, but Tiny deftly dodges, his speed and strength surpassing that of the Lander brothers. As the wolf attempts another strike, Tiny evades again, taunting him about his inferiority compared to the war beast he faced previously. With a swift motion, Tiny clamps his hand over the wolf's mouth, channeling his mana. He declares that he didn't return merely to witness the wolf in such a pitiful state. The wolf howls in agony and leaps back, desperate to escape. Tiny smirks, recalling advice from his war beast companion on handling those who have lost control. The wolf, now frenzied, charges at Tiny once more, but Tiny, quicker and more agile, sidesteps the attack effortlessly. He can anticipate the wolf's every move, likening him to a rebellious dog in need of discipline. He then delivers a powerful kick, sending his opponent crashing to the ground. A sinister smile spreads across his face as he taunts the wolf, claiming that he shouldn't perish just yet, as he deserves a brutal beating. With that, he resumes his relentless assault, recalling the silver wolf's orders to inflict pain, knowing that beasts possess remarkable regenerative abilities. Another kick sends his foe sprawling away. Suddenly, the building begins to collapse, and the beast starts to revert to human form. Tiny rushes over, questioning whether the man has regained his senses, but he is met with fear in his eyes. He demands to know why this is happening and what Tiny wants from him. Tiny, filled with rage, declares that he won't allow his spine to be broken this time and insists on hearing a plea for forgiveness. He prays for his sister, hoping this act brings her some comfort, however small. The wolf appears drained, and Tiny contemplates snapping his neck. Just as he prepares to strike again, the man begs for forgiveness, repeatedly apologizing to Arena. He clasps his hands together in a gesture of remorse. Tiny, consumed by anger, fantasizes about dismembering him and laying the pieces at his sister's grave. But he still calls out to Arena, seeking her forgiveness. Doubt creeps in as he questions whether his sister would even want to see him again. Determined, he decides to interrogate the man, vowing to strike him for every unanswered question. He inquires about the werebeast's sudden appearance, but his attention is drawn to a peculiar red rock nearby. Picking it up, he realizes he doesn't recall seeing it in his past life. As he lifts the stone, a crimson light emanates from it, and Tiny is taken aback to find a silver wolf bound within, its eyes filled with fury. Memories flood back of a blonde elf, who once led him to the mountains to reveal the spirit beasts, creatures that had absorbed mana for centuries and were reborn through the process. Tiny is taken aback to discover that spirit beasts could be found beyond the borders of Elbenheim. He had always heard that animal spirits were rare, and while he might not be a spirit mage, he was aware of that much. Esta inquired if he knew who possessed all that spirit essence, revealing a spirit stone that glowed with an inner light. At that moment, Tiny recognized the stone as a spirit stone, but he was puzzled about how a wolf could come into possession of something so valuable. The stone, however, appeared to be in a peculiar state, and he was astonished to find that it harbored the dark energy of a demon beast. Confused by the situation, he resolved to break the ominous chains binding the wolf first. With a powerful punch, he shattered the chains, freeing the silver wolf. In an instant, Tiny was flooded with visions of the wolf's memories, images of strange figures attacking him. He was bewildered as he watched these shadowy assailants, armed with knives, closing in from all directions. Each of them radiated dark energy, relentlessly stabbing and wounding the wolf, who cried out in agony. The onslaught continued until one of the attackers plunged a knife infused with demonic energy into the wolf, rendering him unconscious. After acquiring the spirit stone, Tiny realized that these attackers had been after it all along. He handed the stone to a child, only to learn that they were forcing people to absorb spirit stones to create war beasts. He turned to the wolf, questioning whether he had been transformed into a war beast, and it seemed Tiny had confronted him before he could fully absorb the stone. The silver wolf, now aggressive, lunged at him, but Tiny intervened, pleading for him to stop. He expressed a desire to make the man responsible suffer more before his demise, and he was astonished to see that the wolf understood him. This revelation was shocking, especially since he had never possessed any spirit mage abilities. Despite having once asked the blonde elf if humans could become spirit mages, to which she responded that it could indeed be achievable, provided he had enough mana. However, only a child could truly have a soul pure enough for such a feat now. He finds himself with Rem, recalling her words, and though he is still quite young, he questions the purity of his own soul. His gaze shifts from the frightened wolf to the silver one beside him. He shakes his head, leaning in to whisper a secret into the wolf's ear, revealing that his mana had seeped into the spirit stone when he shattered those chains. This mana filled the fractures of the broken spirit stone, enabling their communication. The wolf nods in understanding, and Tiny realizes he can forge a bond with him. He extends his hand, eager to initiate the contract immediately. It becomes clear that spirits function differently from magic. While magic requires constant oversight from the caster, spirits merely need a sufficient supply of mana to sustain their forms, making them akin to physical companions. Furthermore, as their spirit mage grows in strength, so too do the spirits. This is why Athena was revered as the mightiest among the 10 knights. The silver wolf then expresses a desire for vengeance regarding his past misfortunes. Tiny, with a grin, assures him that he intends to eliminate anyone connected to the forces of darkness. They both agree to solidify their bond, and as Tiny touches the wolf, he is enveloped in a swirl of mana. The final step in forming their contract involves establishing some fundamental rules. Afterward, Tiny inquires about what name he should use for the wolf, suggesting an Eastern twist on Moon Wolf. He then asks if Wang knows the identities of those aiding the boy in the shadows, as no one seems to have any information about the individuals who were creating werbeasts using spirit stones. Tiny suspects that these might be the same people who confronted the silver wolf, radiating dark energy. They are known as demon followers, fervent zealots who reject the existence of the goddess and instead revere demons. He recalls that they were causing chaos in this world long before the demon beast lord army made its appearance. At that time, he was trapped within a labyrinth, unaware of the full extent of the situation. Meanwhile, the wolf keeps repeating Arena's name, offering apologies as Tiny kicks him, sending him tumbling. He questions whether the individuals who gifted him the spirit stone were demon followers, but the wolf is too absorbed in calling out to Arena to pay attention. The wolf slams his hands against the ground, declaring that the group will not let him escape. To them, he is merely an experiment, and they wield immense power. Suddenly, a jolt of pain strikes his head, and Tiny realizes they have cast a spell on him to silence him. This reminds him of a similar situation from his past life, where a man had vowed to hunt him down. Tiny reflects on how he had tortured those men, who were oblivious to his true nature as a war beast. He dismisses the need to overanalyze the situation, shifting his focus to what lies ahead. Seizing the wolf's body, he slams him against the wall, determined to reclaim what was taken from him. The impact cracks the wall, and Tiny grips his hand again, thinking this information could be valuable to the swordmaster, and he should relay it when the opportunity arises. Using his hand, he scans the wall, revealing a door that opens into a room filled with an array of jewels. He picks up a ring, contemplating its potential use for his plans. The ring bears the seal of V, a symbol that will prove invaluable to him in the future. In his childhood, a woman approached him, inquiring about his name. Tiny shared it, and she remarked on how adorable it was. She then gifted him her ring, urging him to seek her out and bring the ring along, promising her assistance if he did. Now, Tiny believes that everyone in the Azran Empire knows her name, Chloe von Valina, the youngest daughter of the renowned swordmaster ESG Guard von Valina. From a young age, she gained fame for her benevolent actions, earning the title Angel of Valina. He recalls that she would have just celebrated her 16th birthday this year. Tradition dictates that the Valina children embark on a journey through their lands upon reaching adulthood, paying homage with floral tributes at each temple, thereby making their names known to the populace. It was during this journey that Tiny first encountered her in the Invader District, near the estate that bordered the Duke's territory. In his past life, he was unable to exact his revenge and reclaim the ring, but now he keeps it tucked safely in his pocket, convinced it will aid him in his quest to meet the Swordmaster. As he waits, Tiny hears voices and anticipates the arrival of someone important. Suddenly, a man clad in armor appears, assessing the chaos around him. He notices that one of the opponents has seized a member of their group and is swinging him about. Many lie incapacitated, and the armored man deduces that the assailant is a user of Mona. He is taken aback when he learns that a child is responsible for the mayhem. One of his companions boasts that they can easily handle the child, igniting the man's anger. He had already warned them not to underestimate their opponent, and when they insist that the child's prowess isn't due to any substances, he questions Wolf's ability to manage his men effectively. He then strikes one of the guards, shoving him away from the staircase. This guard, known as Sir Ram, captain of the estate's guards, contemplates using this incident as leverage to demand a higher payment. Just then, he spots Tiny descending the stairs and inquires if he is responsible for the chaos. Tiny nonchalantly admits to causing the ruckus, prompting an irate response from Sir Ram, who questions whether Tiny understands the gravity of his actions. With a carefree demeanor, Tiny brushes it off, claiming he merely dealt with a few troublemakers and insists it is not serious enough to warrant a knight's intervention. He smirks, suggesting that Wolf must be paying Sir Ram handsomely. This arrogance infuriates Sir Ram, who retaliates by attacking, challenging Tiny's audacity. As Sir Ram channels his mana, Tiny notes that he has reached the second stage as a mana user. With a swift motion, Tiny slaps Sir Ram's hand away, believing he can easily evade him. Sir Ram is taken aback by Tiny's boldness, but Tiny counters with a knee strike, grinning as he declares he just needs to demonstrate his true strength. Sir Ram acknowledges the child's skill, but is quickly met with Tiny's leap, pushing him back. Realizing he can't afford to make an enemy of the Lord, especially with Sir Ram commanding numerous knights, Tiny retreats, pondering how to make him relent. Sir Ram taunts him, demanding he stop scurrying like a rat, drawing his sword to test Tiny's mettle. Meanwhile, Tiny grins and calls for Wong, who materializes behind him. Sir Ram questions whether Wong is merely a spirit, but the creature howls, sending a shiver down his spine. Tiny, amused, asks Sir Ram if he's calmed down and shifts the conversation to business, probing whether Sir Ram is solely focused on his payment. To Sir Ram's astonishment, Tiny offers to pay him instead of Wolf, leaving the knight stunned by the audacity of a mere child. He inquires about Tiny's age and whether he has used magic to change his looks. Tiny, with a playful grin, claims to be a local but boasts of his growing reputation as an invader. Sir Ram sheathes his sword and questions if Tiny can pay the 5 platinum coins that Wolf had promised him. Tiny laughs, insisting that Wolf only handed him a single platinum coin, and offers 1.5 in return. Sir Ram's temper flares at this, but Tiny coolly suggests that if Sir Ram disapproves, he can simply perish right there, under the watchful eye of his wolf. Taken aback, Sir Ram turns away, astonished that a child would speak so boldly. Tiny presses him for his thoughts, and Sir Ram reluctantly states that payment is due by the end of the month, and he must fulfill it by then. Wolf's associates call out, questioning if he plans to leave, but he silences one with a sharp slap. Meanwhile, Tiny shouts from behind, tossing a coin in Sir Ram's direction, advising him to speak with the Lord now that ownership has shifted. Sir Ram agrees to inform him of the developments and warns Tiny to remember that failure to pay will bring the Lord's fury upon him. As Sir Ram departs, Tiny remarks that he expected nothing less from the Lord. He then turns to his companions, demanding to know their next move. He gives them 1 hour to gather everyone from their gang, including all the women and children begging in the streets. With a menacing tone, he threatens to kill 1 person for every minute they are late, and warns them that Wallang's spirit will pursue and eliminate them if they dare to flee. Fearful, they scurry off to comply with their new leader. Tiny smiles to himself, confident that if everything unfolds as planned, it won't take long to take control of this place.